17% of new car sales in Australia every year are of mid-size SUVs. So this is a purchase that you want to get right. I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and over the next 3 days, our team is going to be comprehensively pulling apart these 11 midsize SUVs. Well, 10 midsize SUVs and a wildcard, the Subaru Outback, showing that there is an alternative option to your conventional medium-sized family crossover. But this size and shape of vehicle is popular in Australia for a reason. It gives families a flexible vehicle that isn't too big. You can still drive it in the city, you can still park it in your garage. But even if you might think all of these vehicles are the same and that they're all substitutes, they're not, as our testing is going to show over these next 3 days based out of here, Wakefield Park, south of Sydney, here in Australia. We're going to be testing for value for money, interiors, technology, safety, practicality, road holding, and performance. We're going to be pulling these cars apart comprehensively. So strap in for the mega test, hit subscribe down below if you haven't already, and get ready to find out which of these vehicles is the true pick. We've assembled 10 popular midsize SUVs and one wildcard station wagon to see how this set fares against each other when compared head-to-head and fair and square. We've brought along the Toyota RAV4, the Mazda CX-5, the facelifted Volkswagen Tiguan, the Ford Escape, the new Hyundai Tucson, the new Kia Sportage, the updated Honda CR-V, the new Haval H6, the facelifted Subaru Forester, the brand new Mitsubishi Outlander, and our wildcard, the new Subaru Outback wagon. The judging panel for this megatest includes myself, Tom Baker, Deputy Editor Nathan Ponchard, and journalist John Law. Midsize family SUVs are the most popular segment of new car in Australia. These are really important vehicles. They're what you put your children into and your stuff every day and when you go away on a family road trip. They need to have excellent road holding, and at the $50,000 level, we have high expectations. These cars need to be practical, but they also need a touch of luxury to make you feel that little bit more special every day. The Toyota RAV4 may be the darling of the Australian new car segment, but its interior is more pragmatic than luxurious. However, at the cruiser level, it starts to feel quite a bit more plush. A clear strong point of the RAV4 are the ergonomics. Everything is in its place and there's a place for everything.
Number one job for the RAV4's facelift is to add height adjustment to this front passenger seat. My head is almost touching the roof and I'm only 178 centimetres tall.
One of the great things about this vehicle is its cohesiveness. It starts at the front, runs to the back, and there's these features highlighted in the interior as well that makes it a nice cohesive package.
The Mazda CX-5 has long been a favourite of Australian buyers, and new technology added in the last year to the top of the range helps keep it feeling fresh. But is it fresh enough? The tech in the CX-5 might not be as showy as some newer rivals, but it really works. This car is one of the fastest in our pack to generate a successful navigation destination and get you on your way, and it was also pretty quick with the Bluetooth.
The Mazda CX-5's back seat is an interesting one. It's a bit of a mixed bag because there's not that much legroom owing to the long bonnet and shorter wheelbase of this vehicle. However, there are some good things it hits back with, including how wide this door opens. So with this bassinet, it's actually got a lot of area to swing out and swing back in.
Now, I know Mazda's had nearly 5 years practice building this second generation CX-5, but it is the only car in the field that has absolutely perfect bonnet fit. This shut line that runs all the way up here is exactly the same on both sides. While the Akera's Napa leather with perforations and fan cooling is absolutely great, the seats just don't quite hit at home.
The Volkswagen Tiguan is a classic Teutonic family hack. The interior design is no nonsense, but here at the top of the range, there are an increasing number of luxurious touches, including leather seats and contrast stitching around the cabin. Even though the Tiguan is getting on in years now, the facelift has definitely brought the exterior up to scratch, and the cabin continues to be elegant, pleasantly executed, and sort of everything is in its place.
Following on from what Tom said about the elegance on this interior, it's also elegant in the way it's packaged. Volkswagen has clearly thought about pretty much everything on this Tiguan. The ISOFIX points are well exposed, as are the top tether points, and it almost makes fitting baby seats fun.
The elephant in the room is the Tiguan I-Line's price. Before you start adding options to bring it up on spec with the other cars here, it's over 54 grand.
One of the best things about the Tiguan is its utility, and that stems from the fact that not only is this one of the shortest SUVs here at only just over 4.5 metres long, but it also has a 615 litre boot.
The Escape shares its interior aesthetic with the Ford Focus and Puma. Is that good enough, coming towards $50,000? And what's the interior of this posh Vignale really like? The back seats of the Escape are pretty well thought out. It starts with a really big positive, which is that the back door handles actually have passive entry as well. The door opening width isn't as big as some other cars on this test, particularly the CX-5. Fitting baby seats in the Escape is pretty easy. Everything is where you'd want it to be. It's just a shame that the width of the car isn't quite sufficient to comfortably seat someone between those baby seats, even for a short trip. It's very tight. The Escape Vignale is one of the cheaper top spec cars on this test, but it does have a long list of equipment, and there's a big saving for going for two-wheel drive as well.
So around the back of the Vignale is also a bit of a mixed bag. It starts again with fit and finish, with the boot tailgate sort of not being equal in how well it's closed across the sides of the car. A little bit of an issue there, but good thing is the kick to open tailgate works really nicely, promptly, and it opens up to reveal a 556 litre boot, one of the biggest in this class.
One of the aspects of the Escape I thought was a little bit disappointing is just the general fit and finish of the interior. Despite not thinking that the luxury is quite luxe enough, the actual practicality and the comfort of the Escape is really good.
The new Tucson has a futuristic interior that's either luxury spec in the Highlander or athletic and sporty as an N-Line that brings red trim and extensive piano black, but the lack of wireless smartphone mirroring won't suit everyone. Unlike the Escape, the Tucson doesn't have keyless access to the rear doors, but they do open very wide, some of the widest on our test, largely because this is the long wheelbase Tucson. It's got more door. The back seat is pretty big. The legroom's only a little bit more than a Toyota RAV4, but it feels really spacious when you're in there. It's pretty easy to fit baby seats in this car, although the side bolstering of the N-Line seats means you can't really get an adult in between two baby seats. The fact we get the long wheelbase Tucson also pays dividends here in the boot. It's not the biggest on test, but as you can see, it's just a big open space.
On this top spec Tucson Highlander, we have the N-Line package that only adds $1,000 to the price, but it does decontent one aspect of it. You get these different style of 19-inch alloys, which I really like, but you get Nexen Rhodian GTX tyres, which are only H-rated, replacing really high-quality Continental tyres, which are on the normal 19-inch wheel on the non-N-Line Tucson, which seems a bit odd. Arguably, the best part of the N-Line package for the Tucson is what it does to the interior trim. It changes what was already pretty nice leather to this very dark coloured but beautiful leather and suede combination.
The pair of 10.25-inch screens is really effective. Everything's laid out really nicely, all the text crisp, and you get all the information you need from the dials in front of you, except for perhaps a map. But really, it's a very good system and nicely integrated.
The brand new Kia Sportage amazes with its integrated interior aesthetic and curved glass screen. But do you get everything you need in a GT line? It's fairly expensive, but if it's kitted out properly, does that matter? Behind the really good looking rear end of the new Sportage is a good boot. It's not quite the biggest here, but it's one of the biggest. The rear seats themselves are big and spacious and easy to fit child seats in, and the tether points are super easy. It couldn't be clearer. One of the easiest cars on our test if you need to get baby seats into it. We really like the tech package here in the Sportage dashboard. That really does move the game on, but we think that the material choice in this car could possibly have gone a little bit further.
The star of the show inside the Sportage's interior is this pair of 12.3-inch curved screen realness going on in front of me, which looks superb.
One of the things I really like about the Sportage is its design language. It's got these cool boomerang LED daytime running lights, which set off these LED headlights as well, which are standard across all models, and it's just quite a cohesive package considering how out there it is, and it has some real road presence.
The Honda CR-V has been on the Australian market for a number of years. The comfortable driving position and good visibility will suit many, but the technology here isn't as up-to-date as some other vehicles on the megatest.
While there's nothing essentially wrong with the way the CR-V looks, I feel like Honda could have gone a little bit further in the update of this car for 2021, which is essentially its midlife facelift. All it has done really is change a bit of the visuals at the front, change the alloys on this VTI LX, and add a bit of safety gear that everyone else already had anyway. It hasn't really gone beyond the minimum. Honda has been clever at back seats for some time now, and the CR-V is still one of those cars. So not only do I have quite a lounging position here with a 2-position backrest and quite a good view, but we also have that double fold mechanism that no other car in this group has.
When you hop into the front seat of the CR-V, you're confronted with really attractive looking black leather seats, which are also very comfortable. But then you cast your eyes over here to one of the most dated screens in this test. It's small, it has really simplistic and immature looking navigation.
It's no secret that one of the CR-V's biggest strengths since its launch has been its absolute practicality, and that's still the same today. Like all the other cars on test, it has a power tailgate, but unlike any other car, it has an incredibly low load height, the lowest in test actually by quite a margin. And so that means it's really easy to fit stuff in. And then as you can see, the magic seats fold totally flat, so it's really easy to carry big cargo like bicycles and other stuff like that.
By a vast margin, the Haval H6 Ultra is the cheapest vehicle on this megatest. So what do you lose and what do you gain? One thing we really like about the Haval H6 is that a massive effort has been made to make this interior look and feel special. I mean, these screens are some of the coolest looking screens on test. The actual displays are thin, crisp and high resolution. The software behind them isn't that intuitive, and the next update to this car needs to stop burying stuff in menus that are hidden unless you know exactly where to look. For me, something that holds the Haval H6 back is that what is a reasonably attractive design ends up getting chinsed out by being over-badged. It feels try-hard.
The Haval H6 is by far the cheapest car we have on test today, 39 grand. Drive away, fixed drive away pricing here in Australia, and that's probably one of its best selling assets, and that's going to get people in the door.
While I love what Haval has done with the general design of the interior, I feel like the details have been left a little bit short in the driving position here. You find that you're sitting sort of splay-legged with the steering wheel a little bit too far away, which may be a compromise on a long journey. What may also be a little bit of a problem on a long journey is the vinyl trim in this car, although it is beautifully stitched and actually really nice quality, but it is not leather. What will be great though is the back seat comfort. This is actually really loungy and soft and comfortable, and unlike the driving position that feels a little bit underdone, the back seat feels almost opulent, which is a real surprise.
The Subaru Forester has terrific visibility thanks to its enormous glasshouse, but does it offer enough luxurious touches here at the top of the range to be a premium family vehicle?
I get that styling is a subjective thing, but the Forester already has a lot going on. And while I love these new alloys, nothing has changed here, and I hate these crab core tail lights. I just think they're low class. The greatest thing about the Forester is its vision. From the back seat here where I'm sitting elevated from the front and have this amazing view and this lovely low belt line.
So the Forester is quite a utilitarian vehicle, and that can be a good or a bad thing. But for me, it definitely feels half a generation older than most of the other cars here. This is the top model of Forester you can get in Australia, and I know that it's missing a couple of features, including cooled seats, but for $44,000 plus a little extra change, it actually strikes a really good value proposition given the amount of space and the fishbowl-like experience that the backseat riders get to enjoy.
Ponch has already had a fat whinge about the crab-clawed taillights, and I completely agree with him. They're unnecessarily offensive, but what's not offensive is just how pragmatic the Forester is. The boot may not be the prettiest thing, but it's extremely practical. The thing about the Forester is it's really inexpensive in this crowd, but in certain areas you can see how Subaru managed to get there. The materials are not plush. A lot of them are soft, which is great, but they're super pragmatic. You know, it's one of those cars where it feels homely as soon as you get in. There's a hell of a lot of buttons. It feels a little oldie-worldy, but you're getting great value. The Subaru Outback is a wagon, not an SUV. That means it's extra long and has terrific legroom in the back, plus a fairly futuristic cabin for a Subaru. But how does it work in the real world? It's really clear, especially when you have the Outback sitting next to the Forester, that this car feels more special. It is just over $3,000 more expensive than a top spec Forester, which is not nothing, but I reckon it feels more than $3,000 more plush. One of the problems with the Outback is that even though it now has this new vertical touchscreen, the tech in this car just doesn't feel as mature as it does on some of its rivals here.
So what do we like about the Subaru Outback? Well, firstly, the fact that it's not an SUV and rides lower than its equivalent Forester means it's probably going to handle a little bit better. I think it looks a bit better, and for only $3,000 more than the Forester and about the same as most of the other cars here on test at $47,000, you get quite a lot of extra room. It's 4,870 millimeters long, so it's really big.
Utility has long been a Subaru hallmark, and the Outback has one really cool feature, and that is built-in roof racks. Now, these bulky roof rails might seem a little bit overdone, but if you lift the lever in here, you can pick up this bit, swing it across, and clip it into place on the other side, and do the same with the other side. So you've already got them there without adding any ugly accessories.
The new Mitsubishi Outlander has Nissan underpinnings, but it will wow with its exterior and interior design, which steps up the quality, both perceived and actual, over the car it replaces to a considerable extent. But does this Exceed have everything you need?
One of the really great things about the new Outlander is the interior presentation. It feels a lot more holistic than the old car. It feels like these screens are meant to be here and like it was designed with this in mind.
Now, this third row in the Outlander might not be suitable for children, but it does make this the only car of this 11 vehicle strong group to offer all-wheel drive and a 7-seat option. From this position, I have an absolutely stunning view, but the back seat doesn't quite completely hit at home. It's very flat. There's not a whole lot of lateral support, and sitting here staring at the seat in front, I can see all of this puckering in all the stitching around the tops of the seat back and around the sides, which just doesn't really compete with the best trims in this category.
What's obvious as soon as you see a new high-spec Outlander is that they're clearly trying. The design of this SUV is vastly improved over the rather appliance-like previous generation. One thing that's really appealing about the new Outlander is the price. This Exceed is $47,990 before on-road costs, which makes it one of the cheapest vehicles on this test, and yet it certainly doesn't look cheap outside or in, and there's been real attention to detail in certain points. But the question is, how have they got it to be this plush seeming for this price? Well, we'll have to investigate further on the test, but first impressions inside are really positive. So, while much about interior assessment is subjective, how do these 11 SUVs rate on inclusions, price and space per our measurements? And when it comes to inclusions, we biased luxury specs, though some vehicles stand out with better headlights and wireless smartphone mirroring. When it comes to measurements, some vehicles stood out for their excellent packaging, while others were pokier. We look at driver, passenger and cargo room. Feel free to pause the video on each slide to see how each SUV compares on space. In our testing, we also took the time to fit 2 child seats to these family SUVs, one forwards facing and one rearwards facing, and there were marked differences in the ease of doing this across each of the vehicles. You can catch our full breakdown of how easy or difficult it is in each SUV in a future video, so make sure to hit subscribe. Market pressure in Australia has meant longer warranties are now commonly found on mainstream family vehicles. For each of these 11 SUVs vying for title honours, we've broken down the warranty period, cost of servicing for 100,000 kilometres, fuel consumption claimed, and what the median budget direct customer paid to comprehensively insure this model in the last 12 months, noting that everybody's situation varies and premiums vary based on criteria insurers take into account, such as where you live, how you garage the car, who drives the car, and their driving history. In the next section, we're conducting performance testing. Why would we do that for a bunch of mid-sized family SUVs? Well, a controlled environment like this one here at Wakefield Park is perfect for distilling the differences in any kind of vehicle. The way they accelerate, overtake, brake, and the way they handle, both in everyday life and in those sorts of emergency maneuver situations that you hope never come up in your driving experience. But if it does happen, you want a car that's really there with you, and we're hoping to pull out some of those differences today. So what will we be doing? Well, we're doing timed 0 to 100 and 80 to 120 km/h acceleration runs. We're measuring 0 to 100 braking distance, we're conducting a 6-point slalom and an emergency lane change and recover scenario with all 11 SUVs. So how did each of these 11 SUVs perform across our performance and handling tests? Let's review the results.
First up, acceleration testing, starting with the 0 to 100k an hour standing test. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it was the Volkswagen Tiguan with its 2-litre turbocharged engine and all-wheel drive that took top honours in this test, and right down the bottom was the Mitsubishi Outlander Exceed. Next up, we've got the 80 to 120 overtaking test, which was topped by the Ford Escape Vignale owing to it not being traction limited from a standing start, and at the slowest end of the spectrum was the Forester 2.5i S. Next up is the braking test, 100 k's an hour to a dead stop, arguably the test that has the most bearing on these cars' safety for your family, and there was a surprise winner here. The Honda CR-V outbraked everything else in this test, only by a little bit for the Escape and the RAV4, but by a significant margin to the Haval H6, which stopped in a bit over 41.5 metres. Now you might think slalom testing is all just a little bit of fun, but it actually tests just how safe these SUVs are in a passive sense. The Toyota RAV4 absolutely dominated this test with its decent road holding and really quick turnaround time from its hybrid CVT transmission. At the bottom was the Haval H6, which struggled to get traction out of the last corner and felt a bit wayward during the manoeuvres. Finally, an emergency lanes change scenario that we're calling the Skippy test. The fastest car to get through this was the Volkswagen Tiguan R-Line at 84 km an hour, 4 k's an hour faster than the next fastest vehicle, which was the Haval H6. At the other end was the Mitsubishi Outlander Exceed, which was pretty wayward, and the power steering system actually kind of locked up and made it difficult to recover the car.
While our controlled environment told us a lot about how each of these SUVs accelerates, brakes, and steers, there's no substitute for on-road testing. Using suburban streets, country roads, and highways here in New South Wales, the other judges and I are able to identify strengths and weaknesses in ride quality, handling, brakes, gearbox, and engine capability in real-world situations.
One of the most admirable things about the Tiguan, aside from the fact that it squeezes so much space in such a small footprint, is that it's such an involving car to drive. It is closely related to a Golf GTI, and no surprise that it actually drives very similar to a GTI, just jacked up a bit higher. And because the R-Line 162 TSI has standard adaptive dampers, it means it can actually carry off wearing 20-inch wheels while still having a reasonably absorbent ride. It does have quite a bit of tyre noise from those big fat tyres on it, but this is a chuckable, fun, strong performing car. It is a really good performer, and yet even though it has all of these safety systems that go along with this level of dynamism, they're never of the level that actually impedes on its driving enjoyment. They work with you, not against you.
The thing that most distinguishes the Toyota RAV4 in this group is its hybrid system, but it isn't just that. Toyota's complete reinvention of its approach to ride and handling also makes this SUV really pleasant to drive, whether you're in town, on the highway, or on a difficult country road like this one. But the hybrid system is just the thing which has made Australia go crazy for this car. With 163 kilowatts in E4 all-wheel drive form, this vehicle has similar punch to many of the turbocharged alternatives on test, but it doesn't have their fuel consumption. Even when absolutely flogged for the purposes of performance testing, the worst we were able to get in this car was 7.8 litres per 100 kilometres, and that's making full use of the all-wheel drive system, as you can see now. But the suspension of this car is really well resolved. It does err a little bit on the soft side, but that makes it comfortable for pretty much any use, and yet there's excellent body control to be found as well. Even the steering is unexpectedly pleasant, and all of this is so surprising because the previous generation RAV4 was really nothing to write home about dynamically. Some cars, in fact most cars, tend to improve very gradually from generation to generation. This one was a quantum leap. So it's simply a fact that driving the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid is a fun, engaging thing to do. The Subaru Outback was our wild card on this test. It's not a midsize SUV, it's a station wagon. It may have cladding, and it may have similar or better ground clearance to some of the SUVs present on this megatest, but it's not really fooling me. The Subaru Outback is a station wagon, and it's Australia's most successful station wagon these days by an enormous margin. Subaru sells heaps of these things. And in the past, the Outback was always pragmatic and well-sized and pretty well priced, but this one is now rigid enough to also be a surprising driver's car. Certainly not in the engine department. The 2.5 litre naturally aspirated petrol is just barely adequate. I have seen commenters saying they think it's enough, but it's really only just enough. You've really got to kind of keep it very motivated under throttle just to maintain the national speed limit on the highway, which is a bit of a drag. But the ride and handling of the new Outback is excellent. The Subaru Global platform offers this car way more torsional rigidity than the old one, and you can really feel that. It feels cohesive and complete while still retaining Subaru's classic all-wheel drive system and off-roading credentials.
The Subaru Forester. First off, the fishbowl is fab. Look at this thing. You can probably see on camera just how much more light gets into this cabin than pretty much any other car on test here, and that makes it the perfect car for I Spy for the whole family. And that's probably the Subaru Forester's best bit. The visibility out of this thing is incredible. That's not to say the rest of the experience isn't good as well. The ride is really comfortable and mostly controlled. There is a little bit of damping, lack of rebound damping, but really it's super comfortable, and at normal speeds it is just a lovely car to drive. It's got a decent steering system too. The only real letdown is the engine, but honestly 136 kilowatts and 239 newton meters from the 2.5 litre petrol engine actually puts it on par with some of the smaller capacity turbocharged engines here on test. So it gets up to speed, and once you're at speed, the CVT lets you roll along quite nicely and hold that speed. So yeah, Forester, good to see out of.
There's no doubt that the new generation Mitsubishi is way better than the near decade-old car it replaces, but it still isn't quite there. There's some good bits about it, like the fact that the engine sounds reasonably refined and reasonably sweet. The back suspension helps it turn into a corner and handle pretty well, but that same engine also is not very powerful, which means the Outlander is the slowest car of all 11 vehicles here, and the just general handling of the car does feel a little bit baggy. You don't really get a whole lot of feel through the steering wheel. The steering wheel is really too thick, I think, and just takes away that crispness. It doesn't have the crispness of, say, a Mazda CX-5 or any of the better cars here, let alone a RAV4. And even the way you sit in the car, like you're sitting quite down the big high bonnet, it gives you that feeling of bulk, but it also feels a bit bulky as well. And I think one of the things that also contributed to that feeling are the 20-inch wheels that look really good, but actually don't ride very well at low speeds and can be quite harsh at times over offensive bumps.
So, the Mazda CX-5 may not grab your attention with glitzy LED lighting signatures or a hybrid powertrain, but the truth is, it's just a really good all-round vehicle. It's got a lovely intuitive steering feel, you've got a really nicely composed chassis that is also a lot of fun for a keener driver to exploit. And this 170 kilowatt, 420 newton meter, 2.5 litre turbo petrol engine is a real gem here. It's hooked up to a slick 6-speed automatic gearbox, and it makes the Mazda CX-5 just feel really well put together and like it's a holistic package. I like this car a lot.
Along with the Outlander, the new Kia Sportage probably has the coolest exterior design on this test. But what's even cooler is how well the Sportage drives on Australian roads. We do have the top of the tree GT line diesel here, but every Sportage sold in Australia has an Australian tune conducted by Kia on local roads, and they've really got it right for this car. The Sportage is probably the most supple vehicle here in terms of country road ride. It just soaks up bumps so well. It really breathes with the road is how I would describe the way the Sportage deals with lumps, bumps, imperfections, and then in town, things like speed bumps and expansion joints are dealt with really well too. It just makes the Kia relaxing to drive. The steering is a little bit leaden for me. You can play with the modes in order to set it up, but smart mode is what works best for this car's drivetrain. But what that does is it gives you quite light steering in town and then noticeably heavier steering on country roads like this one. It just never feels completely right, but the Sportage doesn't have a local Australian steering tune, so that could be the culprit. There's significant choice in terms of engines, but the 2-litre turbo diesel and 8-speed torque converter automatic is what I continue to perceive to be the best choice, though two of the other judges on this test prefer the 1.6 turbo petrol. And I accept that's a really refined engine, as we saw in the Tucson, but the 7-speed dry clutch, dual clutch automatic is not quite as good as the torque converter that you get with the diesel.
One of the greatest things about the Tucson Highlander N-Line is that it looks so good. The seating, the general styling flourishes, and all that sort of stuff really implies that this is going to be a really sporting and polished car to drive. But it doesn't quite get there. I suppose I kind of want it to have more steering bite, just to turn into corners a bit quicker, to just match what the better cars here do, like the Tiguan and the RAV4 even. A hybrid Toyota is more sporting to drive than this Hyundai. And while it has a 1.6 turbo petrol engine, which is also pretty strong in general driving, it doesn't quite nail it in terms of what you think it's capable of. And again, the Toyota's hybrid drivetrain smashes it for acceleration. And then you get to things like the CX-5 turbo petrol and the Tiguan, and the Hyundai is just sort of floundering around in the distance. Better than some of the naturally aspirated engines that are here, but not as good as what you think the styling and a car with a turbocharged petrol engine should deliver. The thing about the CR-V is that it's actually still a really good medium SUV in so many ways, like from the quality of its seating and the space of the car, to the vision, to the subtlety of its safety systems. Even though it really doesn't have a huge amount of them, it's actually quite workable in the way that they work. Its performance is pretty strong, albeit loud and quite laggy off the line, and it handles pretty good too. But it just feels a little bit dated compared to some of the other cars here. And I feel like it's only a really comprehensive makeover away from being something that's really good again.
If you're looking for a relatively, premium appointed midsize SUV, the top of the range H6 is probably going to be on your radar, particularly because this brand is advertising aggressively. Well, the good news is that Haval are pretty much onto something here. You can certainly see glimmers of real competence from the chassis of this car. It is actually the margins and the fine tuning where improvements are most clearly to be made on the H6. And it'd be good if those things were fixed, because many of the basic attributes of the H6 are really rather good. It packs a convincing 150 kilowatt punch, and the engine is really responsive. The gearbox isn't bad either, and so it gets down a country road really quite easily, and it's effortless for overtaking too. The chassis development underneath the H6 shows you that this brand is very, very quickly improving in many of those basic attributes that we look for in any car. It's actually the electronic fine-tuning where there's an opportunity to improve, but given this car's price, we're not surprised that it's ending up on a lot of people's consideration lists.
So to the Ford Escape, and we're going to start with the less good bits, starting with the trim rattles. As we mentioned in the interior, it just feels like there is movement in some of the trim plastics, and you can really hear the rear seats wiggling around when you're up at speed on a country road. So that's a little bit annoying. And also the engine, with its 183 kilowatts of power and 387 newton meters of torque, has a little bit too much grunt for this car to be just front wheel drive, especially in conditions like this. When you get on the gas, it sort of spins up the front wheels and doesn't feel super confidence inspiring. But the Escape kicks back on the road here by having one of the best combinations of ride comfort and control. It's got a really nice edge to it. It catches movement. The dampers feel very good, high quality stuff. I just wish Ford had turned some of the attention they did to chassis tuning on the rest of the package, because if this thing was really well finished, then it would probably be one of my favorite cars to drive on the road. It feels just like a Focus on stilts.
So, having pulled apart the interiors of these SUVs, interrogated their pricing and features, measured their performance and handling, and tested their suspensions and engines on real roads across 4 days, thousands of kilometers, and many debates and arguments, we have what we need to declare where these SUVs rank.
In third spot is the Subaru Forester. It may not be the sexiest, and it's certainly not the fastest, but it does everything so well. It's just above average for absolutely everything in this test, and that glass house is so good, and it makes fitting baby seats easy, and it's going to give kids a great view out at all times. So that's why the Forester comes third, with an honourable mention to the Mazda CX-5. If you're shopping in this class, it's an absolute must that you test drive that car just to check it might be right for you.
Second place goes to the Volkswagen Tiguan for many reasons, but among those are the fact that it is the most car-like vehicle to drive here. It also has the highest threshold for passive safety, and it is equal with the Forester among being the best package car here. It's smallest on the outside, but one of the biggest on the inside, and we really love that in a family SUV.
If the Subaru Forester was the car that subjected its rivals to death by 1,000 cuts, and the Volkswagen Tiguan was the driver's SUV here, the Toyota RAV4 Hybrid is simply the crossover that continues to push the game forward more than any other vehicle in our testing in this particular mega test. That's because it delivers much of the same punch as the turbocharged vehicles here, but via a super frugal electric hybrid system with 3 electric motors. Put simply, Toyota have completely worked out this system. It is seamless, allowing you to cut your personal carbon footprint from transport without changing any of your habits. The RAV4 Hybrid is also priced well if you can get your hands on one. This is Australia's most popular vehicle, and that is for a very good reason. It's an incredibly well-rounded car. It may not have the outright excitement or design panache of some of the other vehicles here, but it's clear that immense thought went into the development of the RAV4 Hybrid, and that's why it is the winner of the inaugural Chasing Cars midsize SUV megatest. So that was the 2021 Chasing Cars midsize SUV megatest. We've torn down these cars from top to bottom, finding out which ones hold the road the best, which are the safest to put your family into, but which actually give you enough room and enough technology to really justify their price. If you found this video useful, hit like down below, share it with your friends and family, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.